Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today's founder is Richard Henry Lee, who's very famous as an American founder, but not so famous as his time as a tax collector. So Richard Henry Lee is a young man, comes from the Lee family of Virginia, an extraordinarily wealthy family, and he goes over to Europe for 6 years to study and educate himself before returning, becoming a wealthy plantation owner, and joining Virginia's House of Burgesses, which was its colonial assembly. Not quite so well known as it's about that time that Richard Henry Lee decides the best career move for him would be as tax collector. You see, Parliament had just passed the Stamp Act, which meant almost anything you had to buy as a colonist needed to get a stamp on it. And RH over here wanted to be the guy stamping things. What he extremely underestimated was how wildly unpopular the Stamp Act was in his community, and in fact, he went into the House of Burgesses where he worked and was censured by his colleagues for taking the position of stamp tax collector, stamp giver. Richard Henry Lee, reading the writing on the wall, as an aspiring good politician, he was already at this point 34 years old and a pretty good politician, realizes his mistake, promptly quits his position, investigates why everyone was so angry, and decides to become the most angry about it. Maybe not the most, we do have Patrick Henrys hanging around, but Richard Henry Lee quickly becomes a leader against the Stamp Act. Now, as with the rest of his colleagues, now that he's on their side, they're all afraid that if we don't do something about this Stamp Act right now, well, there might be some more taxes in the near future that we don't want. Spoiler alert, they were right. But Richard Henry Lee takes the lead in Westmoreland County, where he lives in Virginia, and he becomes the primary author of what's known as the Westmoreland Resolves, which was a series of, well, it was a paper that he and several of his community leaders with him signed in protest of the Stamp Act itself. And you see resolves of this nature happening not only with the Stamp Act throughout the colonies, but through all the terrible acts that come around throughout the colonies. Similar types of resolves of this nature occur. So the Westmoreland Resolves don't necessarily stand out as a particularly important document, but it is particularly important to note the change of Richard Henry Lee's position when it came to taxation from Great Britain. Of course, Richard Henry Lee would go on to, a decade later, be the person who stood on the floor of the Continental Congress and recommended that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states. He would also go on to be a leader in Virginia, an inaugural United States Senator, and all of that. But today's story was focusing on his early life as a tax collector, which you might not know. So if you did learn something, do me a favor. Hit like. That way more people can find out about the channel and learn about the American Revolution with us. And if you're new here, subscribe. I put out videos like this 7 days a week, plus a bunch of fun live ones at night. We do interviews. It's a great time. I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.